So, this is Voices in the Dark. I'm John.
I'm Dre.
And we are learning how to human. And our guest this week is Peter Sage, a returning guest. We were working out about 18 months ago, just before we went to the Sage Business School weekend, an amazing event that you put on. And you've just got out like a day past from doing it again, but so much has changed in the interim. Welcome, Peter. How are you? And can you catch us up on events that have been happening in your life since that time?
Wow, I thought we'd only got an hour.
Yeah.
Well, for a start, it's really great to be back, guys. I can't believe it's been a year and a half since we sat down at my place. Mm-hmm. Now I get to come over to your studio and have fun too. So, that's been great. But yes, just off a 3-day event back here in London at Heathrow, and that just went absolutely amazing. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the energy and reasons around that as we move forward. But yeah, certainly been quite an adventure since I saw you guys last in many different fronts. And I'm happy wherever you want to get started.
Well, do you want to lead in?
Well, I remember I think the very last time I saw you up until now was at your house for a dinner with a few people that were going to be involved in sort of launching the next phase of your business, trying to have it based online so it could reach more millions of people and so on. And you sort of broached a topic that there was a small legal matter that was in the works that you thought was going to be fine, but even if it wasn't going to be fine, you're going to be prepared for that. Mm-hmm. And you dropped me off at the station, and that was the last time I saw you, but the small legal matter didn't quite go smoothly. From what I've witnessed.
And quite the surprise to me as well, to be fair. And yes, I had a civil matter that I was negotiating or arguing a business deal with a major PLC company. And I thought it was almost inconsequential. They're throwing a contempt of court application at me, which I thought was just political posturing and would last about 5 minutes in court. And learned some really valuable lessons about how the court works. and I go into this in some of the letters that I wrote from my new home after that, which was came out of the blue, 6 months in jail.
What struck me as super crazy about that was that I think you were the only civil prisoner in that jail.
Correct.
And it's one of the toughest jails in Britain or something like that? Yeah,
certainly the most violent. It's 200 years old. I mean, since I came out, somebody made me watch an episode of Prison Break from the US, and it's pretty much the same setup. Yeah, pretty much the same way, apart from there's no communal areas for eating or anything like that. You for 7 weeks at one point, for reasons we'll probably get onto, I was banned from education and any employment. So I was spent 23 hours and 50 minutes a day locked up, and you get that 5 minutes to go downstairs and get the food and come back and eat. And it was an absolutely fascinating adventure. I didn't see it coming, and every good level of growth or challenge, one shouldn't be as prepared as one thinks one should be. But it taught me a lot about the UK legal system, and it was really about the fantasy that people have about thinking it's based on fairness. And initially, I think justice, the whole aspect of justice, was based on fairness. It's the scales of justice, but that doesn't work in reality anymore. What works in reality is that people are now given targets, and nobody goes into court with an agenda to lose. So now it becomes far more about winning than whether what's right or what isn't right actually comes to the top, and essentially who can tell the best story. So I didn't really have a lot of resources compared to a major PLC to hire good storytellers. Is what it comes down to there. And I learned some good lessons as well. I mean, on reflection, my ego was probably my worst enemy in court. I went in really looking for a fight to prove why I was right and they were wrong, and that wasn't why I was there. I was there for a contempt application. Yeah. And which is essentially to explain to the court why you've tripped up over some stuff on a freezing order that was essentially designed to trip you up. Yeah. And I really thought it'd be thrown out of court in sort of 10 minutes. I wasn't expecting what happened, and it was a great lesson. And not just from the ego perspective, but from being prepared, from believing your own bullshit, which a lot of the times we tend to fall into. But also not just that, for understanding that life works in an incredibly intelligent way. It found the only way on earth to be able to get me into jail where I could do what I do for 6 months and come out without even having a criminal record, having never been accused or charged with a crime. I didn't even know that was possible.
Very impressive.
But yeah, it found a way and started what became something that I've, hand on heart will tell you, I don't regret a minute of, and wouldn't swap a second of. It was one of the most empowering and incredible experiences I've had and adventures I had, and taught me so much. I'm grateful.
So much about prison, at least as I understand it, is designed to be disempowering, to remove your ability to make choices as to how to live your life. And maybe for many people, it seems like it robs them of their ability to have an identity other than I am this prisoner and this number. So it's surprising to hear you say it was empowering. How could it be that for you? And do you think you're an exception in that way?
I'll address it in two ways. First of all, you talk about identity. Okay. Not for 1 second, not for a microsecond did I ever have the identity of a prisoner at all. I was a secret agent of positive change. That was it. I was on an undercover mission. I was there for 6 months on location filming the prison scene of my movie called My Life. And that's the attitude I went in with. And when it comes to taking away freedom, it doesn't. Why? Because freedom and liberty are two different things. It takes away liberty, but freedom is a state of mind. There's a lot of people that have a lot less freedom trapped in a marriage they don't like, trapped in a job that they can't stand. There's a lot of people walking around that have liberty and no freedom. All they did to me was take away liberty, to an extent. So I still had my freedom, and I decided to make good use of the time I was in there. And I went in, but I never for a second saw myself, as I say, as a prisoner. That was just not something that gelled in any cell of my body. I went in there and I realized this, and I said to Thea before I went in, I said, honey, when it looked as if, hang on a minute, this isn't going the way we thought it might, I'm clearly there for a reason. And if I am going to go in, then there's a lot of people over many years have been helped by the work that I do, and there's also a lot of people that could be helped that probably never get access to that work, and including many people in places like Pentonville. So if life wants to put me in there for a while and see if I can still make a difference, see if I'm qualified to walk my talk, then pull in the pin, throw me in, and see what happens. And it was literally that level of energy.
And did you experience resistance to that? Because whilst we can take the one view, which I would, that's you genuinely wanted to bring that attitude in to make change, be positive, but walking into any kind of established institution with its own set ways of doing things, was there a pushback thinking, who does this guy think he is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, how did you overcome that?
I figured, I got to see things that, I only ever saw on TV and movies. It was a very alien environment to me in that respect. And you have to figure things out quickly. There's no handbook, when you walk in on how to deal with prison life. Your sensory acuity has to be high. And luckily, that's one thing I'm fairly trained in, is being able to have high sensory acuity. Bearing in mind, I've worked with drug addicts, homeless, suicide people, and on interventions for decade and a half. So I'm used to being able to clock things around me and try to work out pretty quickly what's happening and working off micro levels of feedback. And I remember I went in and I'm in the waiting room before you sort of get assigned a cell, if you like. And there's probably about a dozen people in there, and I'm trying to clock everybody. From who are the hardened criminals, who are there, the deer in the headlights, first time, who are the victims, who are the bullies, all of that stuff. And I'm very detached, very sort of independent in the energy around it, because I knew I was there for a reason. You can't fight what has happened. That's ludicrous. If you've spilt the milk, then you can't complain about the fact the milk is spilt. You can use that energy to focus on how to mop it up and move forward. But sitting there resisting what is futile. So I went in and I started to notice that there was just no support, no mental support. And I had this idea that maybe I should be able to create a system that could help, and because that's what I do. And as the days and the weeks unfolded, it became very, very clear that there was a massive issue with chronic understaffing because of budget. And I could see a lot of places where they were wasting money, a lot of places where it was just massively inefficient. The system was massively defective, decaying almost. And so I put a complete plan together and handed that to the governor as to how to save £5 million a year that they could then reinvest in staff and solve most of their problems. Mm-hmm. And that didn't go down too well. I was saying that I actually got a very nice letter back saying that out of the 4 initiatives that I'd sketched out and qualitatively and quantitatively analysed to present, one of them they were actually interested in, which was the new prisoner induction booklet, which I put together. But all of the other stuff, it became very, very clear they didn't want help. Yeah, and this isn't like a company. I'm used to going into companies and turning them around because the CEO is sitting there saying, "Please help." Well, there is no CEO there. This is a balance sheet, non-driven. If we don't make money or don't lose money, or there's none of that commercial agenda. Yeah, it's a government institution where you have massive amounts of politics that are running everything, and not commercial sense. So there was a lot of pushback of that, and so I found out very quickly the system didn't want to be helped. But the prisoners, that was a different attitude. That was a different matter. No one could stop me from helping people, and that's really what I went to work on.
And did the prisoners too? I was thinking of that scene you just sketched. If you're looking around at who are these people, what do I see and feel from them? Who did they think you were, and did it take warming up to be able to show them? And did most people buy that, or did they think that you were a spy in a negative sense, or a potential victim?
It's funny because the first thing that the officer said when I went in there and they were sort of issuing your clothes, which aren't orange, contrary to popular opinion, was, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Are you a police officer?" And I'm like, "No, and that's not the label I really want, or rumours want to be going around to be in here with." Right? I says, but and then when I'm in that waiting room and afterwards, I go into the doctors before I get myself for the night. And the doctor goes through a series of questions and what have you. And after about 5 minutes, he turns around and he says, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Are you undercover?" Right? And I laughed. And I sat there and instead of saying, "No, don't be daft," I actually sat and thought about it because it was the second time I'd kind of been asked. And I'm like, something, I probably think I am, and I sort of shared with him what my plans were, and I think I've been sent here to be able to help some people that probably can't get helped, and luckily he didn't prescribe me any psychotic medication or anything like that, and shook my hand and wished me luck. He said he'd never seen anybody as happy on their first day in prison. Yeah, it's actual quote. But then I went out, and of course, then you're assessing, and like anything, when you go into a situation, you have to be able to do it with rapport. If I walk in there, without a skill set to be able to position myself appropriately, and whether that's to be able to build empathy with a victim mentality, or whether that's to be able to raise somebody else's significance who thinks they're top dog but do it in a way that doesn't put you down, then it's not a one size fits all. And there was so many different stories that came out of that. One, I remember I was walking through the wing one time. We had about 40 minutes of social time a day, 4 days, maybe 5 days a week. Again, the rest of the time it was short-staffed. They just keep you locked up. I think 10 days was the longest I went without a shower. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and luckily not in the last 10 days, so don't worry. But in terms of, I was walking down the wing, and I remember hearing, I walked past, and there was 3 guys that were arguing, and you could just sense the energy. And you're on kind of edge a little bit there. You've got to be alert. I think 3 deaths in 1 week was the worst week I was there.
Wow.
On week 3, I missed an attempted murder by literally minutes, and the amount of blood on the floor was just incredible. But that was almost a daily occurrence. Violence was a daily occurrence. Blood on the floor was a daily occurrence. Hospitalizations, every day or two. It's that level that's in there because you've got that much negative energy balled up. And I was walking past these 3 guys, and the energy was really palpable in terms of aggressive, and it was building. And I sort of, hovered by, and they were arguing over religion.
Okay.
Not a subject you want to spend too much time arguing over in prison, because there's only one way on there. You're not going to convince somebody who's Christian that Islam is the best, or vice versa in a 10-minute conversation. No, you're going to engage in positionality, attack and defend. Yeah. And it was one of the guys, a guy called Aziz, who was basically arguing with the other 2 about Islam and why most people get Islam the wrong way around and they don't understand it, and here's why, and the others were counterpointing, and it was just building. And I sort of hovered. I thought this is probably about 2 minutes from kicking off, and when it kicks off, it kicks off. We're not talking about this isn't a finger pointing competition. No. So I thought, okay, what do I need to do here? Am I going to step in, diffuse this? Can I? And the energy came up and says, yeah. And I go off gut feel a lot of the time. But you've got to be very elegant around how you engage that. The first thing one has to do is break the pattern. Because as the energy is building, if you don't do something right, or if you engage in it in a challenging way without rapport, then it's going to accelerate. You're going to intensify that level of argument. And so you need to break the pattern with something neutral, probably a question, innocuous, that can sort of snap them out of their state. Then you've got to look at, and all the time I'm assessing non-verbal body language, who's in charge, where's it going, who's, what's the power dynamics here. And after you break the state, you've really got to then essentially get yourself invited into the conversation. You've then got to essentially hijack the conversation elegantly without giving them the illusion or without giving them the appearance that they're losing significance. And hopefully recontextualize the argument in a way that allows them to diffuse the aggressiveness in there. And so I kind of, just casually walk past and says, sorry guys, excuse me, sorry to interrupt. I says, does anyone know if we're going to get exercise today? Mm-hmm. Right, and they're like, sort of stopped. You break the pattern. And one says, I hope so. And then Aziz, who was kind of the power broker around that conversation, says, he jumps on because he's still, kind of aggressive. Says, yeah, I really hope so because it's been cancelled for the last 2 days. Right? And the others have gone, yeah, and I've got, tell me about it. I says, just really need to get some fresh air here, guys. And now you're redirecting, but you're building an agreement frame, right? You're moving the conversation, something everybody's starting to agree on. Right? So, and the energy in you maintaining rapport, my nonverbal body language is aimed at Aziz to be able to maintain some level of connection. And I turn around and says, what are you guys chatting about? Mm-hmm. And of course, then Aziz jumps straight in and starts talking about why people get Islam wrong. It's got a bad rap, and the British media seem to be have an agenda on how to incite this, that, the other, and blah 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 blah. And you leave them to talk long enough so that they feel they've been heard. Yeah. If you don't do that, then they're just automatically going to assume that you don't know because you haven't heard enough yet. But you don't want to leave it too long so that they just then get on a soapbox and start parroting out the same stuff that has just caused the problem in the first place in terms of building antagonistic energy from the other people. So you hear enough, and you wait till he takes a breath. And I came back with word for word, but it was something along the lines of, wow, that sounds fascinating. I says, and I think you really have a point. I says, but one thing that's always, sort of fascinated me as well, someone's always puzzled me, and I'm probably not smart enough to figure it out, which again puts the significance frame back onto them. I says that, when I looked at all the different religions, I says, they kind of all tend to teach the same thing. A lot of the spiritual masters all came with the same message. And they taught unconditional love, forgiveness, kindness, tolerance, and essentially how to give up positionalities. I said, to me, it's kind of like the school. They all had the same curriculum, but just like different school teachers teach their own version of it. People go to whichever teacher they resonate with. And says, in fact, I think that most teachers would be grateful that they had other teachers to be able to help because the world seems a pretty big classroom. And if you think your teacher's the best teacher, I said, then probably you'd be grateful for that and have a little bit of compassion for the people that didn't get aren't lucky enough to get your teacher rather than have theirs. I says, but what do I know? And so that's kind of seems like that to me. And you can see everybody sort of stop and start thinking. It's like, huh? I said, and he said, I never really thought of that. Oh, and just as about it was opening his mouth, one of the guards shouted, "Exercise!" and then we walked out, and I started walking with us. I mean, the exercise yard in Pentonville is kind of like something out of Midnight Express. Have you ever seen it? It's like a little courtyard, and you're just walking round and round in a circle, and you've got the sort of gym session there where a lot of the guys try to go and do their significance and chin ups and pull ups and stuff. And we got chatting, and over the next 20 minutes, we became good friends. And he got a good head on his shoulders. He wasn't somebody who was just trying to ram his agenda down people's throats. He generally held a grievance. He was trying to re-educate people, but he hadn't got the elegance to be able to do it by not knowing how to do it in a way that didn't prove them wrong. Yeah. And all three of those guys became good friends after that. And so that was just one example of how I was trying to sort of worm my way in. But you still got to be careful. Yeah. Yeah, you can't afford to be scared. That's another big thing. At no point was I scared. Now, that wasn't because I had some sort of superhero complex. It's because fear in that environment is your worst enemy. You get three people approach you on a landing, and one pulls out a sharpened toothbrush and says, give me your phone credit, or go get me some tuna, or whatever it is, or just has a beef with you for whatever reason because they're trying to elevate themselves in the gang. Then intelligence is going to be your best friend there, not fear. And as soon as we all know in life, when fear rises, intelligence plummets. Yep. And that's a physiological thing. The brain squeezes the blood out of the frontal lobes into the rear brain so you can react off reflex. But the problem with that is your IQ on the neocortex is kind of put on hold.
Down. And anyone that's been in there for even a small amount of time will be so in tune into their mental hierarchy of where you fit in depending on whether they've scared you. So the moment you show fear, they're like,
Yeah. That's it. And some of the most dangerous times I was in there was, I remember I'd had an argument on the phone with you. Now I'm trying to make one phone call, when you get out on that 40 minutes, but everybody rushes to the phone. You get 4 minutes and there's no redial, and you're in a queue. And so you may just run out of the cell and spend your entire 40 minutes, the only 40 minutes in that 24 hours you get out, waiting for a phone call that never happens. Or you call and there's a voicemail. Yeah. Or do you have a shower instead? Or do you go downstairs and process, your forms or applications, or put in some, your meal request, all that kind of stuff. So it's it's kind of an interesting dynamic in that time. But I remember I was on the phone with Thea, and she was under so much stress. She was getting so much hassle with, because nobody really knew the score. They read some one-sided, media articles, and were drawing conclusions. And we just sold 50 tickets to a seminar that clearly wasn't going to happen, and people wanted their money back. And when people's certainty gets shaken, some react with anger, depending on where they are. Especially those that are driven by pride. Pride or significance usually will default to anger if its pictures aren't met. And there's a lot of that. The business school initially attracts a lot of people that are driven by pride, that want to make more money so that they can prove to the world they're good enough. And of course, the sucker punch there is, the whole aspect of the business school is to reorientate the hierarchy of needs into more growth and contribution. I mean, you guys have been through it. Mm-hmm. So I was on the phone, and she was so stressed. And anyway, we had essentially an argument on the phone. And just before I could say sorry or just catch myself, the pips went, and it was gone. And of course, I can't speak to her now, maybe 2 or 3 days, and I felt like crap. And I started to cry. I felt the tears welling up. Now I've got to walk back to my cell through the wing, showing a level of weakness and vulnerability at an emotional level that you don't want to show in there. No. That'll immediately pick you out for a victim for extortion or bullying or whatever. And so there was some harrowing moments as well. But I think what kept me safe most of all is I was there generally wanting to help. And I did. I mean, I was nominated and then later won a national award inside for some of the work that I did that was helping lots of the prisoners get off drugs. I wrote about how I did the suicide interventions that I did and how to break them down so that if you've got people you're doing that are suicidal, you understand what's really going on and how to address it rather than scream or help or worse, inadvertently make it worse, as some people unfortunately do. So the letters that I wrote inside to my fan base were full of kind of a how-to manual on how to deal with adversity, and it was interesting to see how the prisoners warmed up to that, and what they did as a result was because I never asked for anything in return, which is rare in there. Everything's a currency. That I think kept me safe, and people kind of accepted me as the guy that was there. I was different. I was a civil prisoner. They know I wasn't in there for a crime, and some of them felt sorry for me. Some of them couldn't care because they were too focused on their own deal. Not that I needed sympathy. But you got to be careful on where you're coming at. But generally speaking, I was there to contribute and not take, and I think that kept me safe.
How do you control fear, or is it not a case of controlling fear? Because there are so many perfectly reasonable reasons that you've already described, with blood on the floor and sharpened tools around. How did you not feel frightened at the possibility that someone could attack you or jump out at you?
I think part of that is just having a high level of sensory acuity. I mean, I was aware of a lot of the stuff that was going on. Energetically, I could spot things happening before they happened. And so, that gave me a little bit of an edge. Call it a spider sense, call it a Jedi sense, whatever it is. It's not superhuman. We've all got that. It's just that most people get stuck in their head a little bit too much to listen to their intuition. But for me, I also felt as if I was there for a reason. And life isn't going to put me in there to be able to go and help people, only to have me spend half the time I should be in there in hospital. I didn't get that. I didn't get a sense that. It didn't feel congruent for me. So I go to the Bible. Jesus says you can walk amongst them and not be affected by them. And whether he's talking about being in a leper colony or whether he's talking about being in Pentonville, it was that kind of essence. Because I felt separate. Again, my identity wasn't a prisoner. I was there and I was on their side. I was there to help. I was there to be able to really bring a light into a very, very dark place. And at no point did I feel threatened around that. I got a good skill set. I knew what I could and what I couldn't do. And I felt guided in some way that, as I say, there was a higher sense of purpose. And I think, when you see people throughout history that have a higher sense of purpose, they don't mind standing up and being unpopular. They don't mind going to the front of the battle lines. because they feel protected, guided, what have you. Now, of course, does that guarantee that I'm not going to end up on a mess on a pile on the floor? No, of course it doesn't. No one can guarantee anything. This is life. But it certainly gave me enough confidence and not so much confidence. Confidence is a false concept. Confidence is the flip side to the coin of insecurity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all. But the sense of knowing is different. And that's kind of what I had. There was no bravado to try and be so confident that people wouldn't come up. I mean, that's all a mask. People can see that. Whether it's in the boardroom or whether it's on a first date or whether it's in prison. But to be able to just walk around with a sense of knowing, there was nothing to defend, nothing to attack. So why would I attract it? And it was kind of that sense.
Do you ever doubt yourself? Because I asked from a position more of a sort of envy of the ability you have to hold that particular positive frame for yourself. But are there times, especially perhaps in the context of prison, where there are many reasons to feel down or frightened or lost, or the things that you think you're doing that you hope to be positive and not being received positively? Does that flicker? Or do you have...
1,000%. Mm-hmm. And everyone who says it doesn't is lying.
It's good to hear you say it.
Or a lobbyist, or a lawyer looking for a fee. No. But no, absolutely. And the worst times for me were what I call the 5 a.m. egregores, which is how I kind of wrote about them. And I work off the map of consciousness a lot from David Hawkins out of Power versus Force. If people try to understand how to calibrate different levels of consciousness, the difference between anger versus fear versus guilt versus pride versus shame versus courage, all of that stuff. It's a fabulous model to work off. I tend to chunk, or I'm far more known for chunking that into 4 levels of consciousness, which is this sort of to me, by me, through me, as me, which a lot of people like in my work. But the late Dr. Hawkins delineates that into 16 different levels with very highly attuned correlations of emotional state. Your view on life, your view on God. It's beautiful, and the calibration of the prison, as best as I could tell, was in between fear and anger, and that's they're very forceful levels of emotion, which is very strong. It's not powerful. Power wins over time. Force is temporary, but gives the illusion that it can make short-term impact. Yeah. And so, fear and anger were the dominating forces. And I would wake up, my body would wake up at 5 a.m. because it was trained to. But I couldn't get up. I'm sleeping in a top bunk. I've got a cellmate. The second cellmate of which threatened to smash the TV in my face because he was dealing with his own issues. And that was an interesting 10 days spent with somebody making great progress, and eventually he was carted off to the psych ward.
Oh.
Yeah, but bless him, Mark. But I remember lying there at 5 a.m. I can't get up because I've got somebody sleeping underneath. I can't put the light on. The entire prison's quiet. Nobody gets up 10 minutes unless it's 10 minutes before education or something or jobs. It's just it's a lazy. Why would you? For most people. So I'd lie there and I'd be awake for 2 hours and I can't move, and that's when a lot of that negativity would start filtering through. I can't change my physiology, which is the fastest way to change your emotion, is to change your physiology. I couldn't do that, and the thoughts would come. Have I lost everything? What are people going to think? And not too much about what people are going to think, but how do I let people down was more the angle there. I don't care what people think. You can't control that. But I can control my actions in helping letting people down. People have thought I'd let them down. Here's this guy who we looked up to, that we respected, that we believed in, and hang on, all we're reading in the newspaper is a one-sided version of, oh look, businessman, £17 million, jail, like that, and completely out of context.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, HP, an expensive bunch, and Michigan Derrere, a ruthless law firm, and they're not cheap.
I remember you saying that they were the ones that did the Brexit case or something?
Yeah, they fought the Brexit. They're Princess Diana's divorce lawyers. I mean,
Wow.
you don't want to mess.
Okay.
You know what's funny? I tried to hire them a couple of months ago.
Okay.
I had a business deal going down. I'm like, wow, those guys were so good. I want them, but it was they said conflict of interest based on pride.
Okay.
So I tried, but yeah, they obviously were very expensive, and I thought I was on legal aid because they'd put a freezing order on everything I got. Unjust as I felt, but all of my stuff was as frozen. So I was on legal aid. So I thought it doesn't matter if I lose the case because you can't go to prison because it's it's not going to be that bad. No judge in his right mind would ever do that when he understands the context of what's happening. And now I've got nothing to lose because they can spend all the money they want. And no, judge awarded tens of thousands of pounds in legal costs against me, even though I was on legal aid. And I couldn't get it. I didn't understand. And they put it against my house. Was I going to lose my house? I'd lost my business. I went from 53 staff to like 3 staff in a matter of like days. And everything I thought was
that in the Facebook group.
Yeah, it was incredible. And to be able to have a way of dealing with that when you're at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're lying there and all of this stuff comes filtering in, it's like that's tough. And then you have doubts, of course you do, but you have to shake it off. I have doubts if I go on stage. I'm a professional speaker for 15 years. I've been on stage with some of the biggest names in the world. I've spoken in front of 5,000-10,000 people. Do I get nervous when I go on? Of course I do. No, it's not nervous from am I good enough, right? I don't care about that. It's nervous, can I serve these people? They're giving me an hour of their time. They're giving me this. They're giving me that. They're spending 3 days to come to my business school. Am I going to be able to serve them? That's where the doubts come from. In my early days, it was, oh my God, what will they think? What will go on the feedback form? How can I get better? And it was all insecurity. Luckily, I've grown out of most of that now. And but there is doubts, of course. We're human.
In relation to that, what was, if any, the sort of belief, value, or part of your identity that got challenged the most by this experience? And did you change sort of your opinion on that particular aspect, or were you able to sort of go through the other side and go, no, I am right in this, whatever it may be, whether it's a personal way of looking at yourself, a particular belief of how the world should work, or I'm just curious, what was the thing that you're like, this is not quite?
There was never a doubt that I was there for a reason, and that helped a huge amount. In fact, one of the things that I did just before, just after I got there, I wrote a sign, and it was a sign from Napoleon Hill, a quote saying that every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. And I put that above my cell door, and I'd read that every day, and that would help keep me on track. Obviously, you query and you question, will I be able to teach again? Because that was my identity. I used to have the identity of an entrepreneur first and kind of a speaker teacher second. And over the recent years, that shifted. I'm a teacher first. That's where my passion is. I spend a lot of time learning a lot of stuff and making a lot of mistakes that hopefully I can pass on to help people not make, to become better versions of themselves on their journey. But that was queried. I didn't doubt if I was good enough to be able to survive in there. That was never an issue. Thea was worried. Everybody was worried. You watch Prison Break, you're going to be worried. But I never felt in danger. That was different. That was fine. But questioning my identity around a teacher, that's because, again, I didn't know what would happen. Until 2 days ago, I didn't know what would happen. And we just did the Sage Business School, which was essentially replacing the one that was cancelled. And, there's a lot of people that had held on for a year. Obviously some want their money back, but some had stuck it out. And when I came out, people started to see what had happened and what I'd actually done inside, and then started to hear my version and thought, oh, okay. Classic example is a couple of days ago at the business school. I go through, if you remember the 7 card exercise.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that does a lot of leveling about getting people off the game of blaming their parents or running around trying to find a new place to replug their umbilical cord because they think they didn't get something they needed as a kid. And I remember one woman came up to me, as has I think several people at the seminar you did, and said, I've not spoken to my dad in years, and I really think I need to call him. I'm like, well, why are you standing in front of me? Why aren't you on the phone? And she's like, well, I don't have his number. I says, who does? Well, my brother does. Well, go get it. And to her credit, I says, make sure you call him. I said to her, don't come in the room tomorrow unless you call him. And I'm serious, because some people need a kick to get out of their comfort zone. And that afternoon, later that evening, so she came up. She says, I've got to tell you, I just had the conversation. I says, and what did you find out? She says, for the last several years, I've only ever heard my mother's side of the story. Oh. And I thought my dad was this, and I thought he was that, and I've just had the most enlightening conversation, and now I understand. Now I get it. And we finished with the words, I love you, and I can't stop crying. It's a girl from Romania. And it was beautiful. But it just shows you that we get programmed a lot by a one-sided view with somebody who has an agenda or somebody who carries some level of authority or certainty. And it's easy to get blindsided by forgetting that no matter how thin you slice it, there's always two sides. And so, when I came out and people saw not only what I did inside and how I walk my talk, but the fact that, okay, this maybe was was he right in kicking back against something that was fairly unjust? Well, yeah, he probably was. The way he did it was probably lousy. Yep, I'll hands up to that. That was ego. But, I'm not a mass murderer. I don't rob old ladies. I wasn't in there for a crime. And people sort of held that space for me and wanted to come back. And for that, I was exceptionally grateful. But 2 days ago, we finished the event, and I cried. I cried at the end of the event. I said thank you to the audience. We had hundreds of people on live stream, hundreds in the room. And I'm like, guys, I'm just so humbled that you still believed. Yeah, and again, not so much in me. I don't want to make it about me. It's the message. And those people that have followed any of my work know I'm consistent. What's my role? My role is to hold up a mirror to show you your own greatness. Don't make it about me. Otherwise, you miss the message. Then I'm a guru, and then you need to keep, you need to tag me along for the rest of your life in order to find the answers. Well, then that's that's not a job that I want. It doesn't design me out of the equation, and it doesn't empower you.
We were actually talking about this just before you arrived.
The difference, the message and the messenger, and we know that, say, some people, because of you going away inside, decided to sort of push you away, take down interviews with you, and want to dissociate, and it seemed to us, because we didn't want to do that. Well, the message is important, and if you're making a judgment on the messenger, you're potentially robbing people of important content, of important, useful things. But I wonder, do you think there is a breaking point where the messenger becomes so incongruent in some way with the message? I'm not saying this is you, but as a general question, that we can't listen to that messenger anymore?
There's a couple of factors. The first is one has to understand context is definitive. Context is everything. If you see somebody who, yanks a 2-year-old by the collar and sort of drags them down the street, you're going to say, that's a bad parent. But if you see them dragging them out of the way of a moving bus, you're going to say that's a good parent. Same action, different context. So one has to understand the context. You also have to understand the model of the world that people come from in terms of their own self-preservation. One of the 2 sets of interviews that got took down, one was from Bulletproof and one was from London Real. And, I know Dave. I know Dave very well, Dave Asprey. He's a great guy. I've got a lot of respect for him. Dave was one of the first calls I made when I came out. And I called Dave and I said, listen, I just want to say sorry. I never intended any disassociation to the brand, because Dave sponsored my events. He sponsored, Bulletproof sponsored my events for a while, and I was very grateful for that. And the first thing I did, I said to Dave, listen, I'm happy to pay your sponsorship money back. And to his credit, he says, listen, don't need that. He says, but I'm really glad you called, and how are you, and you okay, and all the rest of it. And he says, look, I want to be honest. My marketing team, they do $50+ million a year. They've got a brand, they've got integrity around the brand, and if people see who they're associated with, and again read the newspaper articles, he says, I didn't want to take it down. He says, I love the content. It's one of my favorite interviews, but I was kind of damned if I did and damned if I didn't. And that I got, that I understood. And I understood the context for that. When it came to London Real, I think there was a slightly different agenda. But you also have to take into account that whatever people do is always a projection of their own level of consciousness. Expecting somebody to agree with you when they don't have your model of the world is futile.
Yeah.
And hoping to convince them through explaining your model of the world is about as useful as an ashtray on a motorbike. It's just not going to happen. Right, so if you have an understanding that people can only ever project from where they're at, then use that as a starting point, then you come from understanding, not judgment. Now, they may be coming from judgment, clearly, but doesn't mean to say that you have to. Now, the downside to that, especially with London Real helped a lot of people. That interview, and it was a spontaneous interview between me and Brian, and it was probably one of the most popular interviews. I mean, you should know.
Yeah, I remember it was one of the ones that when we asked people what brought you to the website, like overwhelmingly yours was the top out of 3 or 4 most highly rated ones. Yeah,
and again, it's not. I don't care about me. I care about the message. And to be able to weigh that up and say, well, hang on a minute, if I've got a $50 million brand and I don't want the association, and I love Pete to bits and all the rest of it, but damn, what can I do? That I get. to come from a place of saying, oh, here's probably an excuse to take it down, or knee-jerk, and not be interested in understanding the context behind it when it had helped so many people, I think is more of a projection of where they're at than anything else. And that's a shame, because I would love, even this weekend, as so many people came up, I found you on London Real. It changed my life. I used to do this and now I don't. In fact, I had a guy come up to me and say, listen, I've got to tell you my story. A Chinese guy, actually a Chinese guy with an Irish accent. It kind of confused me. And he says, he was gambling for most of his college years, and one episode London Real, and he's not gambled since, because he understands now the difference between identity, versus behavior at an emotional level versus intellectual level, and all of the stuff that I touched on in that interview with Brian. And it was life-changing for him. And the only downside there is that there's tens of thousands of people that could be helped from that have no judgment about what happened, or would look at what happened in context and think, actually, probably fair play. Or people make mistakes and cut some level of slack. And I asked Brian, would he be willing to put it back up? I asked Brian if he'd willing to do London Real 3 to really have this kind of level of conversation, because once you understand what happened and the context behind it, there's some good insight there, some more value you can add to people.
Did you get any response?
I actually went down to see Brian.
Okay.
And he was putting a party together for being able to shift the studio.
Yeah.
And I sent him a message saying I'd like to come down. I'm part of London Real. And he's like, it's an open party, so you're welcome. And I went down, and of course, the first thing that happens is, half the room are there so glad to see me, because, they've got some benefit from out of the stuff. And I had a good chat with Brian, and he was exceptionally cordial. He was friendly. He was supportive. He was glad that, I came out of the whole issue unscathed. And I said, listen, there's a real potential here, and I'd love to invite you to look at what the context is around that. So you've got from his perspective, no reason not to put them back up.
Yeah.
And I'll give you first shout, because you've been good to me, I've been good to you. I'll give you first shout on London Real 3 to really tell my story in a way that can empower a lot more people, because a lot of people want to know. And I sent him all of the information. I don't know if he looked through it. And I sort of chased up and says, look, I've got a lot of other interviews that would like to this, and I'm holding a space for you. And I just got back a one-liner saying my decision's final. In other words, he's got no interest in putting it back. So again, he's on his own journey, and he's doing well. And I'd never wish Brian anything but the best. I don't wish anyone anything but the best. But it would have been nice, I think, to give the people the opportunity to make that decision, rather than do it from a place of authoritarian dictatorship.
Well, it's we're not surprised, I guess, put it that way. When you said you think there's a different agenda there, what do you think it is? And I find it difficult to have sympathy for my own reasons with Brian, and I'd like to try.
Again, we staying as diplomatic as I can. I had. And again, understanding people on their own journey, first and foremost, again, is an acorn better than an oak tree? No, they're just at different levels of consciousness. And I've never worked with a guy, you guys have, so you've got your own understanding of that process, and I wouldn't impose. But I did have people that were contractors for Brian that resonated with the message I have, really want to come and spend time with me and work with me. And I did go to Brian and say, look, I've got people that are approaching me. Are you okay with that? And I told them, please go check with Brian. It's okay. And I think there was some fallout over that. I think there was some harbored resentment, and I think it was a great opportunity to demonstrate a scorekeeping mentality rather than an olive branch mentality. That's probably about as much as I can say.
So to move on, I guess you came out, and from a lot of what you've said, in a way, it sounds like, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It could be understood you came out and you felt like you didn't change in a way, because you went in. Many people would say they come out of prison and go, wow, it totally changed me. It sounds more like you entered, you saw what your role would be, you performed that role, you lived that reality, and you came out. But do you think you have changed?
Oh, yes. I mean, you go to school for 6 months and you change. I mean, you do nothing for 6 months, the world changes, and so by definition, you've changed your relationship to the world. But to look at some of the shifts that actually happen, I mean, for a start, it was great to be able to spend more time meditating. I got a lot of escape from the traditional noise. And yeah, I was very grateful for that. I mean, the average 5-year-old right now will never spend 6 months in their entire life unplugged from the matrix of electronic communication and Facebook and television and commercial agendas and all that kind of stuff. And so that was beautiful. And what I really started to notice was that after 3 months, it took 3 months, and I journal every day. I kept a journal every day inside, and a list of magic moments. And after 3 months, almost to the day, the journaling started to get a very different vibe. It was deep. It was seeing patterns amongst society and people and consciousness and evolution of psyche and all of that in a way that was just, I would wake up at silly o'clock and grab a pen. Yeah, and of course by then it was starting to get light around about sort of like 6 o'clock, which was useful. But I'd sleep with the pen under the pillow, so I wouldn't be able to wake up, Jim. But even so, all of the journaling that happened after that was just, I was rereading it only a few days ago, just before the SBS, and I was like, wow, that was some of my most profound insights came out of that, and it does shift you. It doesn't shift me in terms of, I can say, oh, now I'm really sorry and I won't do it again. Yeah, that's the illusion of prison. Prison is meant to essentially, from a political buzzword, foster rehabilitation. There's no rehabilitation in prison. No. None. It's not geared up for it. Again, I presented an entire model on how to cut reoffending from 80% reoffending, of which like 60% is immediate, down to 9% using, and I picked those figures specifically, in a way to be able to, and a whole program on how to do it. I also put a program, and I outlined this all in the inside track, as well as giving it to the prison. I outline a system on how they can use the commercialization of prisons, which has been a complete disaster in terms of effectiveness. Great for saving budget, but disaster in terms of effectiveness. How they could use the force of business and the creativity of the commercial sector as a way to foster rehabilitation. I outline all of that. I think it's in volume 4 on the inside track. That was within 8 weeks of being inside. It was so evident. But for me, it taught me a good lesson about my ego, because I went in there, swinging the bat, with the sort of, feck you kind of attitude. Right? I'll prove that you guys are unjust. I'll prove that you're wrong, and that bit me right on the ass. So that was a shift. A little more humility, I think, needed to come forward, and that gave me an opportunity to realise that. And not make sort of knee-jerk reactions to what I felt was injustice, which is a classic Indigo trait. Indigo children will kick back when they feel something's unjust, regardless of what legal framework is put around it, because the legal framework's just simply out of date as far as that mindset is concerned.
How does that manifest now in your everyday life? Do you see yourself behaving differently?
A little more contemplation, a little more willingness to understand the other side rather than kick back straight against it, because I see a lot more of the patterns now. I see a lot more of the intricacies and how they interweave. What I should have done with HP was be able to see what they were doing. They didn't want to go to court. No. That was never their intention. They spent $1 million on me. Right? They ended up with less than 10% of that. Why? Why throw $900,000 at something when you're not going to get a result? In fact, I came out and they called me down to London and says what has to happen for us not to go to court, because obviously the main initial allegation was still outstanding. This was a contempt. Yeah. And the allegation in civil court, they called me down. What has to happen for us not to go to court? And my initial reaction was, I want to go to court, because now I can finally prove I'm right. Which was the same attitude that I had in the contempt, right? But I'm like, I'm going to ask 5 questions. 1, how much money do I owe you? I paid you $12.5 million in full. There's nothing outstanding. Second question, show me one contract, one written document, one authorization where I have agreed to or signed to say that I would not be allowed to resell this equipment, because that's what they're trying to pitch me for. All right, show me. You're trying to class me as a distributor, and I'm not a distributor, never have been. And you're trying to use a resale agreement to try to scare me into getting some profit. I can see what you guys are doing. So show me. You put me a contract on the table that I've breached, and I'll put my hands up. But there never was one. And if you got me to sign something to say I can't resell it, I wouldn't have bought it. Pretty simple. Yeah. Question 3. How much profit did you make? Because if you admit to actually making a profit, and you made a lot more profit than everybody else on the deal, then how can you try to tell me you've made a loss? Didn't exist. It was fabricated. Question 4. I said, but if you knew we were reselling this, which you did because some of the people we resold to were paying you directly into your bank account, then why didn't you ask me to stop? Oh, it's because you were making more money than me. Right. Question 5. Right. Show me anywhere in history where somebody has bought that amount of equipment at retail price. Right? Never going to happen. And you're trying to sue me for the retail price difference. Guys, come on. I mean, any judge looks at that, it's a crock. You're just trying to fabricate something because you got more money than me. Thought you'd scare me into actually making a sensible business decision, which was, oh, this guy's going to, we're going to put a set of handcuffs on him financially. We're going to surprise him at his house. We're going to, we're going to basically freeze his assets and say, look, give us some money and we'll make it all go away. And he's going to weigh that up. Oh, well, I'm either going to spend this much on legals or I'm going to give this much to them. Okay, good chess move, guys, well done. And they're going to walk away that day and we're all going to be friends. Of course, what happened? Dippy here decided to get his ego knickers in a twist and say, this is unjust, this is this is not right, this is unfair, you guys are basically extortion, which is what I thought it was, commercial extortion and financial bullying. Roll the dice, let's go to court and let's get the gloves off. Not realizing they had a lot more boxing experience than I did, and I ended up with a bit of a bloody nose, which turned out to be a great gift. But that's it. So I was down in London. I'm like, no, I want to go to court. I'm going to ask these 5 questions, and any judge with a pea brain of common sense will turn around and say, get out. And then I realized that that's what I thought about the contempt. And that it's, if they were to, spin things around and distort context the way that they did, then, it could go the wrong way because I have zero faith in the court system when it comes down to what's right. I have great faith in the court system as to who can believe the best story, right? And they'd already proved they've got good storytellers. So I'm like, what's the lesson here? The lesson is, I just spent 6 months learning how to let go of my ego. Let's do it again. If I agree, and they made almost an offer I couldn't refuse. And it was like, compared to what we'd already spent, it was like pennies. And they're like, you can't just walk away because they've got shareholders to announce it. Pay us this like almost token gesture over the next couple of years, and we'll drop it and walk away. I remember calling Theo and says, honey, what do I do? She says, what do you think? I says, well, it's not about the money. If you make room for that energetically, the universe will bring you more than an abundance. But if I'm going to spend the next 3 months preparing my own case and putting all my energy into a fight and being confrontational and then getting into court, knowing that there's no guarantees no matter how good you are, how right you think you are, then I'm like, stuff it. Let's shake hands, walk away. And we did. But it was only on the basis that, they'd already spent that much. They never wanted to go to court because they knew it was a coin flip because it was never intended to be put in front of a judge to prove that I was wrong. It was designed to scare me. So I had to learn a lot about ego around that, and I think that was a graduation event of the ego around making that decision.
That decision sounds like quite a tactical decision, but the way that you described your 5 questions, you still sound pretty pissed off.
I was adamant that the factual aspect of it was on my side. Mm-hmm. And then again, you come from a place of the Indigo and you're like, well, hang on, but it was wrong, it was unfair. And then you realize that the notion of fairness is a kindergarten notion that doesn't overlay itself into life. Life isn't meant to be fair. It wasn't designed to be fair. It was designed to essentially provide an environment where we can make choices out of fear or love in order to grow up emotionally. That's pretty much it. And again, you go to school and people say, oh no, the purpose of life is to be happy. Well, grow up. No, it's not. That doesn't mean say you can't be happy. If you take school as an example, what's the purpose of school? Is it to be happy? Well, no. Is it to get a good education? No. The purpose of school is to provide an environment where you can make better choices, and out of those choices, you have a far greater or lesser ability to enhance your education. And you can make those choices to go party and skip class and play truant and not attend exams or whatever. And those choices will likely have consequences when it comes to graduating. Or you can choose to apply yourself and you can choose to study. And none of that has to do with happiness. Now, does that mean say you can't be happy going through school? Of course not. For some people, it's a great time. Some people, it's a nightmare. But it's not the agenda. And life is the same. Life is providing a classroom for us. I call it Earth School, in order to make better choices so that we can grow up to be higher levels of love. Now, is that just a notion? Well, no. There's 400 million years of fossil records that demonstrate that. Well, what do I mean? Well, the purpose of evolution is to increase in complexity. You go from a single cell amoeba to a 50 trillion cell human body. What's the process that's required to make higher levels of complexity work? Cooperation. What's the root side of cooperation? ultimately love. It's the highest level of expression of cooperation. It's engendered into the human species. How do we know that? Because we've been designed as masculine and feminine, which means we actually have to cooperate, otherwise we die. Yeah, the species becomes extinct. Now, at low levels of consciousness, we have some sort of hormones and things that kick in to try and help us along. We'll probably call that lust. But at higher levels of expression, if you don't learn how to love somebody, chances are you're not going to survive as we move forward. So it's not just a notion. We're here to make better choices. And do you choose love or do you choose fear? Because it's a binary equation we spoke about on our last podcast.
Yeah, big theme there, which definitely is something I come back to and reflect on. And to bring things to a close, we've got a couple of big questions we like to ask at the end of a podcast these days, which Dre's the maestro of, so okay. I'll hand over to him.
Well, we have a friend in common, Phil McKernan. You came to the event, if you remember. And he's doing these series of events called One Last Talk. Have you heard about this?
I'm not aware.
So he's putting on these events where people come and speak, sort of tech talk style, but it's different. It's not about, a cause or like a very specific idea. It's, what would you say if this was the last talk you'd ever have? And you're going to die. What would you want to talk about? And so my first question to you is, if you were going to give that talk, or if this was the last time you were ever going to speak, what would you want the audience to know? Well, what's the core message?
Okay. It would have to be around the one word I would focus people into to make it a core principle of their life, and that's authenticity. What I mean by authenticity, it's not about lying or cheating or being true. No, authenticity is about taking the masks off. Who are you? And if at your stage of life right now you are naturally angry person, and that's your authentic expression, then be authentic about it. Don't try to suppress it so it comes out in a moment where it's more inappropriate when your spouse is trying to help you. And by releasing that and by expressing that in a healthy way, you'll probably drop that mask. If you can become authentic, if you can make your life about being real, not driven by the good opinion of others, not driven by the insecurities about how scared you are to prove to the world that you're good enough, to avoid the fear that you're not, to understand that life is about what can I contribute, ultimately not what can I take to self-serve, and all of that has its basis in a level of being real, and that would probably be my message. Focus on making your life real, not real interesting, not real certain, not real secure, but just real, and be okay with that. We're not going to take anything with us out of this game. That's for sure. The very definition of being physical means our destination is non-physical. So what does the game become when when we sort of chunk up to that level? So how would I help people understand that being real is more important than being significant?
That's a really nice one. Should contact Phil about that.
It'd be a pleasure.
The second part of that question is something I came up with, which was the idea of, well, what if this was the last thing everybody was going to ever hear? Humanity dies tomorrow. This is one last message. And not only are you broadcasting to everybody on Earth, but also there's sort of a knowledge that maybe this being recorded will be the first thing that an alien civilization will stumble upon. So you have one chance to kind of try to convey what it was like for you to have a human experience and how it felt for you and what it meant. What would you say?
Wow. What a trip. And it would be expressing gratitude for the gift that we've got. I mean, as the Buddha said, being born a human is a rare experience. Being born a human who has an interest in spiritual progression is rarer still. And the rarest of the rare is those that actually walk that path. So being grateful for this experience, we know that consciousness is primary. I mean, science is now all pointing towards that. And over the next 10 years, you'll see the paradigm shift in mainstream science, where we realize that this is a biocentric experience. The brain doesn't produce consciousness. Consciousness produces the brain and all the experience you have. This is an avatar. And so to have this experience on this place called Earth, where we've got sunsets and chocolate and oral sex and and roller coasters and all of that stuff that makes us be able to be human and enjoy it. Why would we ever get so stressed? Just because somebody doesn't fit our pictures, because we're not driving a car that we think we have to drive to impress people. So what would be the message? Relax and enjoy. Don't take this thing so seriously. Learn how to love, and be grateful for what you got.
Do you think, for the aliens listening to that, what was it to be human? Our struggle to try and overcome the one for the other.
Yeah, all comes down to love. All comes down to love. Were we able to love past our fears? And as human beings, that's really why we're here. That's the nature of Earth School. And so, what's it like to be human? What was it? What was this Earth thing like? It was a pretty cool school. And providing you understand that life is a growth-centric experience. When you get that, everything shifts. Now you have a context for adversity. Now you have a context for, being able to deal with your own fears. It's not wrong. It's just part of the game. You go to school, the questions aren't meant to be easy. You're not meant to get 100% on your exam. Otherwise, you're in the wrong class. And if you pass your exam next year, the question should be harder. It's the nature of the game. And so many people are trying to get this one place where they suddenly stay because they think, it's to find happiness where I can relax and not do anything else. That's not why we're here. People die 18 months after retirement on average. Why? Because they stop contributing, stop growing. I have no more purpose to be here.
I'm letting that sink in. Thanks very much, Peter. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your perspectives, and your story. For the people watching and listening, what are the best ways to be in touch with you, find out more about what you do? How would you like them to proceed after hearing this?
Oh, thank you. Well, my work's available freely on YouTube. I try and put as much content out there to help people as I can. If you want to come and play personally, or if you want to see what I'm up to in terms of some of the programs that I run, then petersage.com is always the best place to go and have a look. And if you want to get in touch, then the email's always the same, happytohelp@petersage.com.
Fantastic. And is there anything upcoming? So obviously the SBS has just been, but is there any sort of new event or sort of thing that people should watch out for?
Well, the Inside Track is something I'd encourage everybody to look through. I've got an audio version of that as well.
Okay.
That'll all be published probably in the next couple of weeks, actually. So by the time people listen to this, it'll be available. You can download some of the copies off my website as a gift right now as well. But that's a series of the letters that I wrote every 2 weeks while I was inside, initially to my coaching groups, my Master Circle and my Elite Mentorship Forum. And when I came out and I reread them, and people says, wow, the world needs to hear this, because again, it's a how-to manual for dealing with adversity. If you can handle being thrown in Pentonville at that point, and when you have a breakdown in your relationship, or you find out your son's been arrested, or you're on drugs, or whatever it may be, or you get fired from your job, or all that kind of stuff, it's easy. Because you've got a context and a contrast frame for it. But I give you the specifics, the how-tos. So I'd love people to read that and share my journey.
Okay. Cool. We'll put up a link to direct them to whatever part of the website has that.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for coming along, and maybe it'll be a less dramatic 18 months in some ways for you, but maybe we'll see you again then.
Well, I hope so. And remember, the Olympics is every 4 years. The World Championships are every year. If we're in a growth-centric environment, then I'm sure life's going to throw me the next challenge and put some weight on the bar, because that's what athletes do. That's why we're here to grow. Without challenge, that doesn't happen. So bring it on.
Thank you for coming, and until next time, everybody.
Please be silly, be kind, and be weird.
Kaboom.